Please, all the people who are still standing, please take your seats. In the next hour, we're going to deal with the decision-making process in the state of Israel and to what extent this process has an impact on the results. The subject is very general, but we're going to reduce it. And if I look at the panel sitting here, we'll reduce it to security and foreign policy. And I think we couldn't have selected such a group to express its opinion like the members of this distinguished panel: Amos, Gilead, General in Reserves, Professor Arad, the former head of the National Security Council, Ambassador Prosor. He was a senior diplomat, and in his last position he was the Israeli ambassador to the UN, and Major General in Reserves Yaakov Amidror, former head of National Security Council, an advisor to the Prime Minister. And wasn't it? No, so it's my mistake. It says it was a Minister of Defense who wanted to be Prime Minister, but he wasn't. And finally, he was also a Security Council and National Security member. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about the cabinet today, the political cabinet. And I'm not sure whether the organizer of this event is Amos Gilead. And with him, nothing is accidental. And I suspect him that this whole issue about the decision about Gilead, was it understood, was it not understood? Somehow he's behind the planning of it in order that in this discussion we will be able to bring a good example, a real time from yesterday, how the cabinet deals with such critical questions like what happened with Gilead. What's so critical? I don't think it's critical at all. It's nonsense. No, I'll tell you. People who are against it, I quote, no, but here we have serious people. Gilead is nothing, not important. No, everybody says it. People who made a spin out of it, no, it's not important. Yes, but Yaakov, I suggest let's hear. No, but this is just gossip. Why don't we deal with real problems? When the question at hand is 16,000 housing units, some people say it's existential danger, and others say it's nothing. How can we be in this situation? I'm just bringing this as an illustration to the questions at hand. I ask each of you, if you had to just give us in bullets, what is your bullet? What is your headline, Yaakov? This is an example to a spin, nothing important. I recorded 3 other decisions, serious ones, and we have to see how they were taken and can we learn something from it. One is the agreement with Egypt without the participation of professionals, and it derived from a political, historical decision. The second one was the Oslo Accord, maybe the most important decision that Israel took after the establishment of the state. It was without all the professional systems. Until today, we see the results. Some people say for the better, some people say for the worst. And the third one is the withdrawal from Gaza, the disengagement. It was unilateral. We decided not to get anything for it. Some people think it's a good result. Some people think it's not. And we have to look at these 3. These are really major, not this nonsense of Gilead, with all due respect. We have to ask ourselves whether there's a connection between the process of decision-making, because each of them, anybody from the outside would look at it, would say, this is not the way to make decisions. And to look at this and to say whether there's a connection. Is there a connection between the process and the result? And I think that the example that I wanted to explain is that this connection is very difficult. That's the chess game. In chess, all the data are on the table, assuming that there are 20% with a tie, 80% one side loses, although all the data are there. Okay, but that's not your bullet, your headline. It's very difficult to connect between the process and the result. Okay, thank you. Ron. Well, I think that I'm sitting here actually to talk about strategical decision-making or the process in the national security of Israel, that in many cases, and it includes prime ministers, many of them, actually the viewpoint is through a telescope which is one-way street, that the security aspect is the most dominant. And the political issue, actually opening an angle with binoculars to see other things, is negligible. And that derives from structural issues in the process of decision-making in the state of Israel. And every time that there was a combination between the political issue and the security one, and allow me here to turn it from issue to something personal, is when Amos Gilead, by chance he's sitting here, and I, in Washington, we knocked at the doors of the White House in 1998, and we spoke about the danger of a nuclear Iran. Leon Firth and a minute ago, nobody heard about it, and this combination in the various levels, political security, I think brought about a very good result. Uzi sitting here, and in why he dragged me together with him to sign and to talk with those factors about issues that are still sensitive, that have to do with the national security of the State of Israel. And this issue, this combination, brought about good results. Dubi, when you managed things with Sharon, with Shalom Turgeman at your side, you understood the importance of it. And Yaki, I'll get to you later on. Thank you. Uzi. In order to say things categorically and unequivocally, I'd like to say that the process determines, shapes, and decides the results. What do you call a process? If, for example, the process is the lack of an organized process with professionals, this will be felt in the results. This is a process deprived of various components. But on the other hand, something that's proven historically, that the process where people do base on professionals, it improves the results. Now, to take 3 events where it sort of seems that the process wasn't there of consultation, I can take it somewhere else. And I think neither Amos or Yaki will object to. I can say, gentlemen, intelligence is completely superfluous. It's a waste of money that the intelligence community invests, because I can show a few decisions that were made without the intelligence people, or there was no intelligence at all. I can even show you a few successes that were achieved without intelligence, and I can show a few cases where there was intelligence and we failed. So what does it mean? It means that there's no connection, and therefore intelligence is superfluous. No way. Because you can say that there were things in the past, some things were done without the intelligence, but using intelligence benefits the ones who use it. It doesn't ensure success, but it does raise the chance to have educated decisions. And therefore, but the question is whether we need a process of headquarter. To a great extent, the role of headquarter is to make sure that the intelligence is reflected with all its possibilities. Without these things, it's not going to go. And it's unfortunate that a school of thought is developing that says, okay, maybe yes, maybe no. This is not the way. I want to quote the person from the headquarters who was the most successful in modern history, Eisenhower. Eisenhower, who was the commander, the biggest commander of the army in the Second World War. He waged the whole world war on his own. As a head of he wasn't a combat officer, but he was a great commander in the headquarters. Then he was the president for 8 years of the United States. He knew the best headquarters until today, as far as the internal headquarters in the White House. That same Eisenhower, at the same moment, he said the following sentence: plans are not important. It's the process of planning which is important. Same goes for decisions. Okay, decisions, forget them. It's the process that's important, the process that determines and the process that can give a chance to be very successful and not less successful.
Amos. Well, throughout the years, I happened, just like my distinguished colleagues here, who were elected to be in this panel because of their entire experience. But too many things have been decided upon without proper thorough thought, and they had a long time effect. Until nowadays, I cannot understand how come they decided to join the Falangas under a cabinet instruction to connect to a force that did not exist, to be entangled in this for dozens of years, and then pride ourselves for leaving Lebanon. I think that this affected and was the result was the first intifada. There was no real consideration and understanding of the facts. I'd like to share this experience with you. But this started in the beginning, in the 70s. It occurred through three prime ministers, three governments, yes, but they didn't give them weapon. But when you send IDF soldiers to connect with those corrupted, this is a horrible decision. The Oslo Accords was one of the most horrible decisions, as far as I see it, for a simple thing. Who thought that in 5 years' time you can lead up to an interim agreement with the most complicated conflict in the world and then think that it's not going to become violent? Something is flawed in the entire process. In addition, the entire intelligence community is made up of very strong bodies, but the connection between them is not strong enough on the strategic level, not that of sharing information. There is a problem. They try to resolve it, but the entire system is problematic. The cabinet and Amidror now is investing a lot of effort. Uzi made some effort regarding the law. 10 people who have a lot of responsibility in their offices. They are not perhaps the commander-in-chief, but they are decision makers. But something is flawed. Something is flawed in the system. It's too much dispersed. And when you want to have strategic direction, you turn to the army, and the army draws it and outlines it, and the rest would follow. There are very deep flaws, and I think that they cost us in human life. And I'm not talking about other processes and foreign relations, etc. My last sentence is that the security system excels itself in headquarter work. It's too strong compared to the others who are not so good at it. And the Security Council does not get to a professional level, because simply in the United States, if the head of Security Council calls someone for discussion, they have to come. The head of the Security Council has a special personality here, and some might come, some might not attend the meeting, some might not share the information, all of these. It doesn't mean that a good process will ensure good decisions, but a bad decision, if you don't have leaders like Ben-Gurion, perhaps with Ben-Gurion they had a cabinet discussion whether to establish the state, and they would vote based on assumptions. Leaders like Begin, with the peace with Egypt, you don't need perhaps headquarters process, but we do, and we need a good process to make good decisions. Thank you. I think that together we managed to understand the borders of this discussion and the fields of this discussion. And within the time framework, I'd like to focus on what seems to be the main issue. And I talk about the work of the cabinet as it happens nowadays. Once again, I go to the issue of Gilead, whether it is important or not. How do you think we can prevent a situation where you hear such such an argument with such extremes related to a topic which is seemingly simple. Same goes for a protective edge, for example. And I'm not going into the issue itself. Should we discuss the tunnels or not? Should we fully discuss it or partially so? It seems to me that throughout our public lives, we once and once again come over arguments and interpretations and conflicting testimonies as to what had happened. And of course, it should be noted that the government is the commander-in-chief of the IDF. No, it is the chief of staff who is commanding the army. He has to answer to the prime minister and the minister of security, but the government appoints the chief of staff, but is not commanding him. This is the law. I was quoting from the law. In our methodology, the chief of staff, as the commander-in-chief, has to answer to the government, and the cabinet is the proxy, is actually the proxy on behalf of the government. It is the administrative body, the chief administrative body of the State of Israel. The most critical decisions are happening there. And so I would like us to focus on what is happening here and now, the politicization, turning back all of the political blocks that are always having an eye to their voters. Yaakov, what do you make out of this? Well, since I have been working on this report regarding the improvement, the cabinet's work and performance. First of all, there is an inherent problem in Israeli government methodology, and this is different than other democracies. In democracy, the one to make decisions are elected politicians, not specialists who were appointed for that. All attempts in the world to turn it into a situation where the experts will make the decisions brought horrible results. Democracy is, I guess, the lesser problematic of them all. This is the essence of democracy, and we have to make sure that this remains so. We shouldn't spoil it with the feeling of people that perhaps understand better, perhaps they do in some of the cases. It doesn't matter. We want a democracy. Politicians will have to make decisions, and politicians, by being politicians, they have all sorts of consideration that they take into place. It's okay, that's the way it should be, that's the essence of democracy. They need to be elected, and it's very good that they take this into consideration. They have to think about what they're doing. Second thing, following our methodology, unlike the American one, there's an even graver problem. Since here, after the beginning, all governments are coalition governments, and recently coalition governments, the prime minister doesn't have a large majority even in his own coalition. Here we have the former prime minister just entering the hall. He understands this wall. There is a situation where in the cabinet we have people whose idea and opinion is different than that of the prime minister's. And in some of the cases, they want to replace the prime minister. And still, together with the prime minister, they have to make the decisions. We have no solution for this. We'll have to live with this as long as this is our election methodology. When I look at London, I'm not so sure that we have it so bad. These two things bring about an inherent problem within the cabinet. In the past, they tried to resolve it by creating an extra cabinet body. They called it the quartet, or some sort of other definitions. But this body did not have any decision-making, but don't have any illusions. Politicians were there as well. The advantage was, because this was not a statutory body and there was no protocol, discussions were more thorough and serious. Did it promise that later on in the cabinet other considerations did not enter? Well, no. As a person who attended the table in three directions, as a secretary, as a researcher, and once the head of the National Security Council. So, by definition, as a body which is made up of ministers in a democratic country where there's a coalition, these problems will happen. Another issue is involved, and it was already mentioned, all these ministers in the cabinet, they all have their own office. We, the citizens, test them according to what they achieve in their offices, whether it is justice, etc. Only one is judged for the national security. The Minister of Defense is responsible for defense, and the Prime Minister was responsible for 10 other things. But in the State of Israel, he is the only person who sees the level of national security and everything below it. I'm familiar with the minister who, by law, should have been part of the cabinet, but he said, let me go, I want to handle my issues in my office, take someone else instead of me. So we have another problem. The problem stems out of the fact that we, the ministers in the cabinet, they are also responsible for their own offices, their own ministries. If they work properly, 24/6, no Saturday work, when will they handle the issues of the cabinet? Some of the things that we have to change is we need to force them. There are going to be two people whose entire job is to harass, and I'm using this word, harass, to at least study the data, because ultimately I believe that if cabinet members come and they know exactly, the data will be in a whole different place as far as our capability of making decisions. These four things that I have just mentioned are inherent to the Israeli government, and they cannot be resolved. We can talk about them for a long time. We cannot resolve them, and we have to learn how to function within the limitation of this methodology. We have to understand that it is unchangeable. And all in all, looking at the decision-making process here, comparing it to the world, the entire world, ultimately, we are not the last one in decision-making in our process. Some time ago, we sat with British experts, and they said, we really admire the way by which the State of Israel is functioning within this lunacy of the Middle East. So ultimately, with all the problems that we have, cabinet decision-making is probably not the worst in the Middle East or the world, and all in all, I think that compared to the problems that we're facing in this crazy Middle East, what Shimon Peres called the new Middle East at the time, so within this new Middle East, we're functioning quite well. Thank you.
I read Yaki's report, who did, as usual, very good job, and I looked at who actually who participates in these cabinet discussions, what experts are there. And I discovered that beyond the Secretary of the Government and the legal advisor, we have the General Secretary of the Prime Minister and on the Minister of Defense, and also, if I'm not mistaken, a security counselor for the police. No, only things that have to do with the Ministry of Defense. Okay, but there's also the Minister of Internal Police, who is not there. No political factor, not the CEO of the Foreign Office or a political advisor to the PM. Namely, from a structural point of view, in this system of the decision-making process, and they say the experts leave, and the ministers make the final decision. Yes, but structurally, there is a factor missing, and that's the political. Why? The foreign minister is a senior member in the cabinet. The three the Minister of Defense, the foreign minister, okay, but I'm saying that if we talk about the political issue, there's no politicians there. So let's take things that are relevant, and all the people around here will agree to it. Let's take, for example, we'll go back, Ehud Barak just left, but the issue of the Falcon transaction. Basically, the Israeli embassy in Washington not only spoke and said, gentlemen, this is the moment and act that can bring about a severe strategical crisis with the American Congress and American people. And there was a big tension that, God forbid, an American pilot would be. And that's why they say, and he said it again and again and again. And basically, everything that didn't happen. Why? Because this person wasn't there in the place where they actually make the decision. And now, so it's not just this. Don't confuse politics with softness. Why softness? This is one of the assets that the State of Israel has. There's no connection to softness. You can, in a very serious way, act against this issue of the universal law in a political way, rigid and tough, in order to make sure that Israeli politicians and army people, but the political issues should be in the forefront as part of the process. So really, in the decisions, when they are made, they will be made as decisions that at the end of the day will prevent strategically any jeopardizing of the State of Israel, whether it's in ICC or the Security Council or economic sanctions that today in the world where the prism is expanded is much more complex. And this structural issue doesn't exist. What is it similar to? A baseball player, excuse me for the American analogy, who holds the racket with one hand. And you know that every good baseball player needs two in order to hit. So what happens that after the strike, we don't even have strike three in order to leave the game. I don't know baseball too well. I didn't quite get you. You have to hold I don't know anything about baseball. What can I do? Okay, let's talk about football. That's it. Okay, Ron. But I think, no, Dubi, what I want to focus on, and that is that structurally it cannot be that we will be 44 years after the Yom Kippur War in the Agranat Commission, where it was decided, because of various reasons, to establish the Center for Political Research in Israel so that we have a political intelligence in the State of Israel. And this, today, to date, 2017 needs resources, human manpower, and a status around the table. And believe me, the forefront commands all around the world that supply the information and the know-how together with these political elements are today mostly without water, without weapons, and not talking about night vision weapons or rockets. You have to put it into the structure of the decision-making process. But we're not dealing now with the proportional allocation of the various resources. We're talking about the work of the cabinet. The political aspect is not reflected, but a lot of the people who are critical of the cabinet that it's too-minded to the political issues, and they say that they don't do what's good for the Israeli citizen and what's good for the world. You cannot say that the cabinet doesn't think about the political. Maybe they don't do it well, maybe they don't see the whole picture, or maybe they don't do what they have to do. But who sits at the table there? The foreign minister, as Yaakov said, justly. He's today a critical angle of this triangle. But Uzi, what do you say about it? You can hear here evidence, tangible, regarding the nature of the process. When the component of the process that we're talking about is who participates, who is present, and so is reflected in his areas in the discussion. And the Director General, former General Director of the Foreign Office, says that systematically this branch, this arm was not there. It didn't sit in those meetings. I'll tell you one thing. I used to come to the cabinet meetings to sit in the gallery already at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, on behalf of the Mossad. At that time was present the foreign minister and the Director General of the Foreign Office. Then I went on a mission for a few years. I came back again with the Mossad. I used to come over there and I asked myself, where is the Foreign Office? And apparently in the years that went by, the landlord, so to speak, made sure that he will not be there. It's not accidental. There was an alienation of the foreign ministry when the one who participated there was the minister himself. Now, when I was appointed a few years later to be the political advisor of the prime minister, like I was somebody is responsible to do what? What was my responsibility? To make sure that the Foreign Office is there to overcome those who wanted to reduce and wanted to cut. And this was my main mission. And later on, and it was always there, and it came to really extreme cases that I boycotted the discussions because it was an international discussion, and the issue wasn't if it was political or not. The issue was whether this is reflected on the international arena. The moment it did, of all sorts of interactions with other countries, the Foreign Office is the arm that deals with this. And this systematic alienation was a failure, and my main task from the Security Council was to prevent situations that people who should be there are not. Now, in Protective Edge, there were instances where the foreign minister didn't know about international negotiations to bring about ceasefire. Can you believe it? What is this? There was a situation that he himself said, I hear it from ambassadors. They tell me about some sort of a negotiation because the one who actually managed it was the Chief of Staff, the Minister of Defense, and the PM. Today, this problem is solved in a very manipulative way. The PM is also the foreign minister. So he consults himself, and then he reflects all his ministerial expertise. He is also a minister of other things, and you tell me what you think about the effectiveness or the appropriateness of such a process. And now, we already see the things that, in fact, the process there has components that actually make decisions. First of all, I alluded to the fact about the problems of Gilead, but that's again, it's the informative issue, and usually that's what the intelligence should do. Now, I'm telling you that the intelligence people don't have to go there and to play as if they are deciders. No, they come there in order to give their professional services. And without their services, the decision makers will be disabled, completely handicapped. So you can also make decisions by tossing a coin. You know that if it is a decision whether to attack or not, and we say, why should we discuss it all together? We don't need the experts, and it's a shame that we politicians, why waste our time? Let's toss a coin. The chance for a successful decision is 50%. I wish we had 50% in every other area. This whole idea was that in fateful processes, things that are one-time decisions, the right preparation will be such that also from the professional way, as well as the essential and democratic way, will be through a process. Now, the Israeli legislator democratically authorized the government to make decisions, not the PM, not the Minister of Defense, the government. The government decided that it wants to bestow this authority to the cabinet. But still, this is a political echelon. It's the ministers, it's the key ministers, the foreign minister, defense, PM, etc. No doubt whatsoever that they are those who decided. And don't think any professional factor will come and say, I decide. If at all, maybe he can intensify, but the professional people, they have a mission of very complex headquarter work to give this decision the possibility to be educated decisions. And if you make painful decisions after the people of Israel already read a lot of what happened in the Yom Kippur War, when all the commissions, the Agranat and the Gahan and Vinograd and investigative and missions of inquiry, these were based on painful failures. And these are the things that brought about the arrangement that determined in two documents in the law and also the procedures of Lipkin Shachak that were written by the most experienced people. This was the result. They decided what are the protocols of the organized processes. For example, for the fact that you must have intelligence, it's obvious. If you do things without intelligence, you're a criminal. It's already a criminal against the law and the people and everybody else. If the foreign office is not there, or if they boycott the foreign ministry, it's a crime. No justified reason for that, and it happened. But there is another requirement to give alternatives. Sometimes people say political alternative. No, we're not talking about political alternatives, namely change. We talk about alternative policies. For example, maybe there are 2 ways to wage war, maybe 4 ways, as long as there won't be a situation where the discussion is based on take it or leave it, of one option, and usually was taken by the planning bodies, and this is a very painful lesson of the Lebanon war, because the political echelon did not make a decision, because they already reduced all the alternatives in a lower echelon, and that's not democratic, because the essence of decision, from an abstract point of view, the one who decides is that person, no matter which rank he is, that out of a selection of possibilities, he decided on one. This decision is the decision. If the professionals come with one option, they actually already made a decision, and everything that they say to the political echelon, they say take it or leave it. What the lesson said, no, the political echelon will make a decision. That's why you have to bring the spectrum of alternatives. Is it done? Not enough. And that's a violation. That's a felony. And I say with full responsibility that unfortunately Protective Edge showed many disruptions in this functioning. And I think that, Yaki, if you compare between your functioning in Pillar of Fire and the way the council functioned in Protective Edge, and you'll see that things that were done well before, and there were no problems in Pillar of Fire, and you were in charge that time, did not happen in Protective Edge. And on that, there was a criticism that went out, and also everybody knew about it. But I hope that your conclusions will be such that, first of all, will enable the cabinet to do its democratic job. But I just want to talk about one more element, one more component in the process, the appointments. Who are the people? I just heard that we are not that bad. I look at the body that Amidror and I headed. From the United States came the head of the Security Council, General McMaster. Look at his background. Look at his credentials. Look at the professional hurdles he had to pass. Look at what he did, and look who sat with him on the Israeli side. Thank you. Amos.
Well, I have to disagree. I think that I'm sure that Amidror will do excellent work because I know him. But a cabinet with 10 people can never make decisions until they finish talking amongst themselves. They're exhausted. They exhaust each other. I'll tell you what was the problem for me with Gilead is that things got out. If you want, you can have a political rally of the people. Cabinet has to be has to work under secret. So who should make sure that nothing goes out amongst others? The Security Council. Oh, wait a second. Several things. As far as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think it's in a terrible situation. It has main ambassadors. I don't want to start listing them that are not connected to the ministry. You don't have an ambassador in Egypt now for 9 months. The intelligence is more and more sensitive. By the way, if you hear about Gilead, then intelligence information can also get out. The intelligence has more and more achievements. I don't want to present it now. I would be very afraid to raise sensitive issues. It's absolutely unbelievable. This culture of people taking out secret, sensitive news. First of all, we don't have a head of the Security Council for a year now. This also goes to show something. Well, assuming that we have some recommendations on Amidror, and it's we have the council, but we don't have a head of the council, so it's not functioning. There are some decisions and reporting that nobody knows about. They're secretive to people that are relevant, that bear responsibility. Excuse me for saying so, but the only place I know where there are very thorough discussions, including the possibility of voicing one's opinion, is in the army, at the Chief of Staff's office. This is why they are formulating the strategic goal, and then they get it back. These are very thorough, absurd situations that are not about to change because it only increased the fact that the army does it so well. It is because more than any other body, it works according to orderly processes and professional principles. This is what makes it effective. No, they simply do it excellently. That's why they're excellent, but they see it as the army. The army also has their interest, whether it's budgets, and then they are arguing with the Security Council. This system is completely wrong in its formation. I'll give you an example about Gilead. The Prime Minister is under pressure from the American side. So he makes decisions. He has his coordinators. I'm sorry, I was there, but not at a personal level, but he belongs to the security system. He's an army officer, and so they say we're going to allow this or that. The moment it becomes a political argument, what sort of decisions can the Prime Minister make? He's either going to upset the Americans or others. This system is all wrong. So when you come to the army, to a discussion in the army, you can talk freely. Nothing leaks out. We don't have this sickening phenomenon where the secrets of the utmost important leak out. First of all, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was deconstructed into 5 offices. Our ambassador in Jordan came to the Chief of Staff and says Jordan is about to topple down. Well, it's okay. I don't know who authorized her to get him directly to the Chief of Staff. The Ministry of Security didn't hear about it. She said that Jordanians are upset about it. We have an amazing relationship with the Jordanians. We save lives. Each and every person can go to whomever they want, and then we see it reported in Haaretz newspaper, particularly when there is an English version. The Jordanian read it, and we lose. People's lives are lost. We have to meet the schedule, so I cannot go further with this. But before we build a proper thermostat, before we crash it so that we don't see if a person is sick, we have to look at the sickness. You cannot run this country with 10 people in the cabinet. It's too many people. We have to have a small people. And leaks are a crime. We have to fight it like a crime. If the Mossad or the intelligence corps gets some information, which is huge, and all of a sudden you have it out in the paper, and then our enemy reads it, so what do you want? So the army is way more efficient because its organic development was more efficient. Amos, could you say a word about what Yaki said in the beginning, where ultimately democracy comes with a price tag? It's a mechanism which is definitely not perfect. Isn't everything you're describing the price for a democracy? Well, even if I don't agree, this is democracy, and the political rank has to give instructions downwards. But everything that you have mentioned are the side effects. No. Should a person have a disease? Can't you prevent the disease? Can't you lose weight? Make sure that you have proper diet? Can't you prevent leaks? Can't you have to-the-point discussions? You don't have to escape the security forces to make sure that nothing escapes. No, we're not discussing this issue. What Amidror had said, I agree with completely. And even if I don't, it doesn't matter because this is the reality. I don't agree that this is a necessary side effect. I am not comparing us to other countries. It is not necessary, but maybe this is what happens if you have I'm just giving you an example. If you have a politician in Russia who might not be elected because of this or that decision, so he won't be elected, then I'll go even further and say there's an exoneration in describing the secrets that are come out of the state of Israel. I see in front of me people, to my left as well, people who know that most of the real secrets of the state of Israel don't leak out. And so, as someone who saw it from both sides, as a citizen who reads the papers nowadays, I can tell you, unlike what the paper says, unlike all these shoutings, well, it's not as if I like what I see out there. I don't like the leaks. I think there's really a lack of responsibility. But ultimately, the main secrets, the real secrets of the state of Israel do not go out, do not leak out. Unless you talk about a distance of many, many years, people who might think that they're not being cherished enough or valued enough, so they open up and share a few secrets. Underway, most serious things don't come out. I'm not protecting anything. Whatever comes out is very serious, but I do think that perhaps it's not good, but there is an exaggeration. One thing regarding the political aspect, since we were sensitive to the incorporation of the political, we have stipulated, and this was authorized by the government, that managing war in the state of Israel will be done in a team of 3, and not only by the Minister of Security and Prime Minister. And this was authorized by the government. Minister of Foreign Affairs is part of this management on an ongoing basis, because theoretically you cannot manage fighting without the minister. I think this is a big change in the direction Ron was talking about. I would like to thank the panel for the fascinating remarks. Thank you very much.